Hello everyone, I'm Zhe Ma from Tsinghua University. Today I'd like to present our work, PrIntFuzz, fuzzing Linux drivers via automated virtual device simulation. Linux drivers share the same address space and privilege with the kernel's core, so the drivers are not reliable and they are not well tested. The previous study shows that 85% of the vulnerabilities in the Android kernel reside in drivers, but the existing research mainly focuses on a portion of driver's code, and they ignore the overlooked driver code, the initialization code, and the interrupt handler that currently account for more code have not been focused on before. And drivers may have a very large attack surface. The user program could send system calls with different arguments to change the data flow, and the peripheral could interact with drivers by MIMO or DMA to change the data flow of drivers. As for control flow of drivers, the user program could send different system calls to change it, and the peripheral could send an interrupt signal to drivers to preempt the processor and interrupt the current control flow. So, a smart father should consider both attack from the user space and the peripheral. Researchers have proposed many solutions to discover the vulnerabilities in drivers, and fuzzing is one of the most promising solutions to discover vulnerabilities. So, researchers present several fuzzing methods to test the Linux kernel drivers, and we list some of them here. More and more fuzzing solutions use virtual platforms such as QEMU, but they usually only use a small number of virtual devices. As for the functionality of the virtual devices, the existing fuzzing solutions usually focus on the main interfaces such as normal system calls, and the existing work only considers one of the two attack surfaces. So PrIntFuzz wants to present a diverse virtual device, including most of the device functionalities, and performs coordinated multi-dimension fuzzing. There are three main challenges to achieving the goal mentioned above. First, the diversity of virtual devices supported by fuzzers is limited, and PrIntFuzz proposes an automated device generation schema to solve this challenge. Second, the functionality of simulated virtual devices is limited, and this makes the code coverage of corresponding drivers low. PrIntFuzz presents an automated solution to simulate major functionalities of devices to overcome this challenge. Third, the attack surface of drivers is not thoroughly explored. A smart fuzzer should test the driver from many interfaces, such as user space and hardware device. So, PrIntFuzz developed a coordinated multi-dimension fuzzing solution to perform thoroughly fuzzing. Based on the challenges and the solutions mentioned above, we present an effective and efficient fuzzing solution, PrIntFuzz, to explore the overlooked code in drivers. PrIntFuzz executes a three-phase workflow for driver analysis and fuzzing, as the figure shows. First, in the virtual device modeling phase, it first performs inter-procedural static analysis to extract necessary driver information, such as data expected by the driver. Second, in the driver preparation phase, PrIntFuzz creates a specific configuration file to enable device drivers and instrument the kernel with fault injection. Third, in the fuzzing in QEMU phase, PrIntFuzz generates the general devices based on the basic templates and then performs coordinated multi-dimension fuzzing on device drivers. We will describe the workflow of PrIntFuzz in each of these three phases. In the virtual device modeling phase, PrIntFuzz first collects information from the driver code. We observe that the driver usually performs sanity checks on the hardware device during the initialization process to determine whether it works properly. and we should let the virtual device pass such sanity checks to model the virtual devices and match with drivers successfully. PrIntFuzz models virtual devices in 3 dimensions. They are data space, I/O and memory space, and configuration space. For the data space, the driver will read values from the hardware registers and perform sanity checks as shown in the figure. PrIntFuzz tries to infer the proper value that the hardware register should be based on several heuristic patterns. PrIntFuzz will solve the I/O space and the configuration space in a similar way. Based on the driver information collected before, PrIntFuzz prepares drivers for fuzzing. First, PrIntFuzz enables the corresponding driver by finding the config name of the driver and then finding the dependencies of the config. For example, we first find the config name of the driver is KYRO, and then resolve the dependencies of this config as FB and PCI. In order to test the initialization code, PrIntFuzz first finds possible fault sets of the initialization code and performs fault instrumentation on drivers. Finally, PrIntFuzz performs fuzzing on QMU. In this phase, PrIntFuzz first generates virtual devices based on a basic template. PrIntFuzz will fill in items empty in the template with the information extracted before. For example, the device ID, config value, and the memory region information, and so on. Given a virtual device, PrIntFuzz could perform coordinated multi-dimension fuzzing on the corresponding driver. PrIntFuzz will test the driver from both the user space and the hardware device, as the figure shows, and we add 2 specific system calls to inject the interrupt and the further generated data, respectively. First, the fuzzer will interact directly with the driver via standard system calls and the fuzz module using the 2 specific system calls. Next, the fuzz module in the guest kernel space raises hypercalls and sends specific data to KVM. After handling the hypercalls from the guest, the KVM quits to QMU, which is responsible for sending the interrupt signal to the virtual bus or the generated data to the buffer of the virtual bus. The virtual bus will traverse the virtual devices and matches their name of them. If a device name is matched, the virtual bus then triggers the corresponding interrupt line of the device and injects further generated data to the DMA region or MMO region of the virtual device. The interrupt handler of the driver will be executed after the interrupt is triggered. PrIntFuzz will collect the driver's coverage and feeds it back to the fuzzer for the next iteration. To assess the performance of PrIntFuzz, we evaluated PrIntFuzz by answering the following research questions and verifying its effectiveness, bug finding ability, the improvement in code coverage, and the scalability of PrIntFuzz, respectively. First, we evaluate the effectiveness of virtual device modeling on the latest Linux kernel. PrIntFuzz has successfully simulated 311 PCI devices, with a success rate of 50.5%, and we compare the number of devices that PrIntFuzz can simulate with QMU and the state-of-the-art fuzzer VAA. The number of virtual devices supported by PrIntFuzz has increased considerably from the original QMU and the VAA. VAA could be extended to support more virtual devices, but requires much manual effort to write configuration templates. On the other hand, PrIntFuzz supports 2 times more PCI devices than QMU. And we also evaluate the ability of PrIntFuzz to discover bugs in drivers. PrIntFuzz has found 112 unique bugs of PCI drivers in the Linux kernel that were not found by other fuzzers so far, and 50 of them are confirmed by developers and patched. There are also many kinds of bugs that PrIntFuzz can find, including non-pointer dereference, divide by zero, use up free, and so on. And the Venn diagram on the right also indicates the distribution of the position of bugs. The figure shows that the initialization code has the most bugs, and the fault injection method helps discover the bugs. And the bugs found in the interrupt handler and other parts of the driver also prove that the multi-dimension fuzzing is effective. We also compare the ability of PrIntFuzz with SysCaller and VAA to discover bugs. PrIntFuzz discovered 94 more bugs than SysCaller and 49 more bugs than VAA. The second graph shows that injecting interrupts is valid even if no actual simulated devices are used. The third and fourth groups also shows that by using actual simulated devices, the ability of bug discovery has improved a lot. In addition to the ability to find bugs, we also evaluate PrIntFuzz's improvement in code coverage compared with SysCaller. We only instrumented the kernel's drivers and sound directories in this experiment. Specifically, we added a baseline for each group of the experiments, which uses the SysCaller's default system call templates for fuzzing, without adding additional templates or virtual devices. We could exclude the interference of some general code by adding such a baseline for each group. And we could find that the actual virtual devices and the interrupts both improve the code coverage. Although PrIntFuzz used the PCI drivers as the example above, the methods provided by PrIntFuzz can still be applied to drivers and other buses. We apply the methods presented by PrIntFuzz to USB drivers and I2C drivers to verify this ability. The results show that PrIntFuzz can extend to drivers under the USB bus and the I2C bus and successfully simulate 346 USB devices and 472 I2C devices. To sum up, we found that the existing fuzzing method overlooked a large portion of driver code, including the initialization code and interrupt handlers. To explore these codes, PrIntFuzz first simulates 311 PCI devices and finds 150 bugs in Linux kernel drivers in total. After simulating these virtual devices, PrIntFuzz performs a multi-dimensional fuzzing solution and fuzzes the driver both from the user space and the hardware device. And we will open source our solution on GitHub. Anyone interested in it could achieve the code. This is all my talk. Thanks for listening.